Welcome to lecture at 5.3, 5 Steps to Helping. This stands to probably be the longest paper that you'll write in this class that is tied to this assignment, to this lecture. It's the 5 Steps to Helping, and what I'm looking for is for you to be brief in this assignment, be concise, be tight, be linear. So we'll get to that. Let's talk about the 5 Steps to Helping. These kittens, that's 6 kittens there, they were Boots kittens. Boots was pregnant on the porch, and I brought her inside so we could not have our kittens be feral and we could socialize them. And we did this pretty successfully, and Boots has stayed with us ever since. Interestingly, I had one person adopt all 6 kittens. She was out on a farm and said, "I'll take them all." Boy, was that an easy kitten adoption. You guys are lucky this semester. We haven't had any kittens, or I would be sitting here deluging you with pictures of kittens and begging you to adopt them. Right? So, not this semester, and I'm not sure why. So, 5 steps to helping. Let's talk about it. Well, we're back with Darley and Latane, right? And their work, this grew out of the horrible murder of Kitty Genovese, where no one did anything to help her, and the country was reacting to that, and social psychologists then had to answer the questions, why don't people help, right? So the bystander effect was one of the things that was discovered. Why did no one help in Kitty Genovese's case, and why did no one help in many laboratory experiments that kind of set up to operationalize in a laboratory environment the same circumstances under which Genovese was begging for help? Were social psychological processes at work? And yeah, of course they were. When are they never at work, right? So, spoken like a true social psychologist. Bystander effect, this is where the presence of others inhibits helping, and Darley and Latane showed this in the laboratory, and it's an interesting formula, because the more people who witness, the less likely you are to get help. That's a very interesting finding and very counterintuitive, which makes it a sexy finding, according to my advisor Marilyn, that we've talked about, right? So, what do we know? The more bystanders, the less that'll be help. Now, the 5 steps to helping an emergency is a systematic approach to understanding when there is an emergency will ultimately, and let's do the ultimately part, here's the emergency, will help be provided. Right? So there's 5 steps, and what I'm looking for in your paper is a clear definition, explanation of each step applied to the situation in the prompt. Within each step is a series of obstacles, and those need to be described in the paper as well. So I really want you to keep this under 2 pages, type double space, so you've got to be super concise. Expect to do a pretty serious edit on this, to go back and cut it out to make it fit that 2-page limit, right? So we have an emergency. We need to provide help. The first step is we have to notice that there's an emergency. If we don't notice there's an emergency, there will be no help provided. So now we pop in the obstacles in the black boxes, and what we see here is maybe I'm distracted. Maybe I'm walking down the street, right? I'm walking down High Street. I'm sitting there with my phone. I'm doing my thing, and someone falls, and I don't even notice, right? I'm distracted. So no help is going to be rendered because I failed to notice the obstacle was the distraction. Yeah. Or maybe it's self-concerns, and we can see that maybe I'm worried about the ramifications or the consequences of stopping to help, to spend the time, etc. So self-concerns might prevent me from noticing as well that I'm just distracted by the world. Now, if I do notice, right, so we've got the emergency, now I've noticed. What comes next on the way to providing help? Well, just that I've noticed means something has happened, but do I interpret what happened as an emergency? Maybe it's an ambiguous situation. Maybe it's not clear. Maybe that person is not laying there because they're injured. Maybe that person is laying there because they're simply asleep. Now, I know that's a bit of a stretch, but the ambiguous situation might cause us to pause and not render help. Maybe it's the relationship between the attacker and the victim that has us concerned. General Patton, right, 3 and then 4-star general, World War II era, post-World War II, Patton, was an all-out kind of guy. I mean, he didn't take any shit from anybody, and he was the first to charge into danger. He was not a fearful general who hides behind his troops. He would often be at the front, right? He comes out of a restaurant and he sees 3 men putting a woman into a car, and immediately assumes that the 3 men are kidnapping the woman. He goes over there and he creates a complete confrontation to rescue the woman. Unfortunately, the woman was sick, and these were her friends just helping her in the car, and this could have blown up into an international incident, which Patton could hardly afford. Right? So the relationship between the attacker and victim might prevent us from helping because we're not clear on what it necessarily is. And then pluralistic ignorance, and notice now we're getting into some super duper helping behavior terminology that was discovered in the laboratory. Pluralistic ignorance is an indication that, well, I look and I say, I wonder if that person needs help. And there's 5 other people standing with me, and I look over at this person and I say, well, that person isn't helping. And then I look at the next person, I said, that person isn't helping. And then we're all sitting there looking at each other for advice, essentially, on what to do. And since none of us are doing anything, then the majority opinion becomes that nothing needs to be done, that we're pluralistic, we are together ignorant of what needs to happen or what has to take place, right? But let's suppose that we overcome the ambiguity. Let's suppose the relationship between the attacker and the victim are clear, right? And we can avoid pluralistic ignorance. Then we say, okay, it's an emergency. We got this far. It is an emergency. What are we going to do now? Well, now it's time to take responsibility. Just because there's an emergency doesn't mean I have to do anything about it. Another fancy term, diffusion of responsibility. I said, it's not my job. It's not my place to do anything about this. Someone else needs to do something about this. So I diffuse the responsibility upon others. I take no responsibility at all. All right? So, but let's suppose I say, no, that's not going to wash. I have to take responsibility. All right? Well, now, what we have to move to is deciding how to help, right? Suppose I lack competence. Suppose it appears the person isn't breathing, but I fell asleep during my CPR classes. I don't know what to do for this person, right? So I took Red Cross training, but I didn't pay attention. I lack competence. I don't know what to do, so I'm simply afraid to do anything. I just don't know what to do. So, but let's suppose I do have the competence. Okay, I know what to do, right? I got to decide how to help. Well, now there's 2 more obstacles before finally rendering help. Maybe I'm embarrassed to help. That is, the audience inhibits me. I'm afraid of looking like a fool, okay, for whatever reason. Maybe there's a homeless man that's kind of scruffy there and maybe kind of dirty, and I realize that he needs mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and here are my 3 friends, and we're all guys, right, and we're like being all guy about it, and it's like, oh, you going to put your lips on that guy? You going to give him the kiss of life? And maybe, that wigs me out and I'm not able to do it at that point in time. So, but let's suppose I can get past the audience inhibition. Maybe the cost exceed rewards. And let's talk about the same situation. Communicable diseases are real, right? And if I go and put my mouth on that person's mouth, that may in fact, if they have an infection of some kind, that might transmit that infection to me. And maybe I determine that the cost outweighs the reward of helping. So I might choose not to do it on that basis. Right? But let's suppose I get past the costs and rewards, then what do we end up with? Finally, providing help. Okay? So you can see, rendering help is not a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, we could almost argue that it's surprising that any of us get help at any time at all. But this is the process that Latane and Darley laid out in 1970, right? In their book, The Unresponsive Bystander, Why Doesn't He Help? It was a great book written for the popular press and talked in common language about many of the experiments they had conducted in the laboratory to highlight these mechanisms. So your paper then, right, there's key terms, and your paper is going to have key terms in them, these key terms in it: bystander effect, diffusion of responsibility, time pressure perhaps, distractions, yeah, pluralistic ignorance, lack of competence, audience inhibition, self-concerns, ambiguity. These are all key terms within this lecturette, right? So assignment 14, we have you as a character, well, Jerry is the character, walking down the streets, notice a young woman collapse to the ground. Right? Please explain what he's going through and what steps he'll need to take and the obstacles he'll need to overcome to eventually help the young woman, using the 5 steps as your backbone of your paper, right? And it needs to be done in a totally linear style, so that's what I'm looking for. So you probably need an introduction to set it up. I would say a short paragraph for each step is probably the simplest way to lay it out. You may think differently, so do whatever you're going to do, right? But we need an explanation of each step, an intro to each to set the stage, the explanation to each step, obstacles within the paragraph for each step, and then the conclusion. Does Jerry render help? And in this case, probably we want him to, because let's make it cool, right? Questions about that? So like I said, longest assignment, maybe not the most difficult assignment other than being super concise, super clear, and really following the model. Okay? So this might be the closest we're going to do in this class to what might be described as technical writing when you get right down to it. Not completely technical writing, but certainly of that ilk, let's say. And that's all I got for this one. So, and there's my dear departed Cracker. I still miss her. She passed away on December 21st last year. And I miss that cat. Anyway, so that's your assignment. Be clear, be concise, and be linear, and it should all be good. So, on to the next one. Ever onward.